In today's Toy Bible story, we're learning about Paul's trip to Rome. Paul had just finished up his missionary journeys, and he worked his way back to Jerusalem, which, if you remember, Jerusalem was like the capital city for God's people. That is where a great number of Jews lived. Paul came back, and he began to tell all of them about who Jesus was. He would say, "You need to believe in Jesus. Jesus is amazing." And he would share his testimony with them. Well, the Jews didn't like that very much. So they had a Roman guard arrest Paul, and they were going to beat him up. After they had Paul pinned down and ready to beat him up, they realized that Paul was a Roman citizen, and so the Roman guard let him go, and Paul began to explain to them that it was illegal for them to arrest and beat a Roman citizen. The Roman guard saw that Paul was correct, and so he actually locked Paul up anyway to keep him protected from the angry Jews. There was about 40 Jews that had worked together who said that they were going to kill Paul that evening. So the Roman guard had Paul transferred to a place called Caesarea. When Paul arrived at Caesarea, there was a Roman governor who was in charge, whose name was Felix. He began to ask the Jews, "What has Paul done wrong?" And they said that he's been talking about Jesus and stirring up trouble. He then asked Paul, "Paul, is this true?" And Paul said, "I have not been stirring up trouble, but I have been talking about Jesus." And Paul took that entire moment to share his testimony in front of everyone that was gathered around while he was on trial that day. So Felix decided to have Paul locked up under protection of Roman guard until they could make a better decision. And then there was a new person who took over, and his name was Festus. When Festus took over, Festus wanted to help the Jews out. He wanted to do the Jews a favor, and he wanted to end this thing with Paul once and for all. So he held the same trial. He asked the Jews, "Why are you so angry with Paul?" And the Jews began to explain that he had been causing trouble and telling people about Jesus. Festus then asked Paul, "Paul, what's your story?" And Paul once again explained, "I have not been causing trouble, but I have been telling them about Jesus." And he took that opportunity once again to share in front of the entire crowd about his testimony and how Jesus had saved his life. Festus, wanting to help out the Jews, knew that he was in a sticky situation because there wasn't enough evidence to persecute Paul. So he asked Paul if he could send him to Jerusalem and allow the Jews to try him once again there. And Paul said, "No, I want to see Caesar." Caesar was the highest ruling person in the Empire of Rome. So Festus was in a tough spot, but that's when his friend, King Agrippa, came to visit him. When King Agrippa came, Festus began to ask Agrippa for some advice, and Agrippa said, "Let's put him on trial one more time." And they asked the Jews once again what was going on, and they asked Paul what was going on. And once again, Paul explained his entire testimony to the crowd that day. Both of them realized that this wasn't much of a trial to be having, but they agreed that they had to send him to Caesar due to Roman customs and laws. So they decided to send Paul to Rome. And so Paul took off for Rome. Paul had finally arrived in Rome. And when he arrived there, some Roman officials began to ask why he was there. And he explained his entire story and told them his testimony. They felt it was also not proper for Paul to be punished and locked up for what the Jews were saying about him. So they actually allowed Paul to rent a house and preach the gospel under their guard right there from Rome for many years. This is because Paul was living a life for God. Paul had God's plan in his life, and Paul was able to do amazing things.